Let's look at Greenaway's three-stage model. It's a very popular model, simply called the Plan, Do, Review model. The starting point, I suppose, is to talk about do, have an experience in the classroom. And this leads into review of that experience and then planning the next steps in teaching, planning the approach that you will take. We can look at this in terms of a model. Again, very simple: plan, do, review. Doing something, reviewing, thinking about it, planning the next action, and then doing the next action. There are benefits to this, of course. One benefit is it's a very simple, easy to apply model. And because it's focused entirely in action, it's grounded in teachers' everyday experience, and that gives it a lot of value, gives it a lot of meaning for the teacher. Because it's a very simple model, it's also very quick to do. It's not at all time consuming. Especially for the beginning teacher, it has a lot of benefits over the more complex models because it's much easier to understand and apply. What we're actually looking at with this model, therefore, is something which can be practiced in schools very quickly, very easily. What you actually need to do with this model is to think of it in very practical terms. It is a model for continuous development, of course, and is especially useful for new teachers or if you're starting with a new class of students beginning a new term in school. And it's especially useful also with activities in the classroom which can be quite repetitive, where you're doing things over and over again, because the plan, do, review cycle will help you refine what you're actually doing in those lessons. It can be a very useful approach if you're collecting any data for further analysis, if you're doing some action research, or if you just want to gather more data about your students. And of course, most importantly, it's very useful if you're trying to implement some sort of change to your teaching. It's very quick to apply. You can monitor the change process very easily. So the procedure plan, what you need to do is recognize an opportunity to actually make a change or do something in your teaching. The reviewing is actually analyzing the results of the action that you're undertaking. And what you need to do then is to plan improvements which you will then action in the do phase of the cycle. So some useful questions we can look at in terms of each of these three stages. In terms of the planning stage, some questions might be, well, what data indicates a change is required? Rather than just initiating some sort of change for any reason, there's got to be some good foundation for the change to take place. What change is to be made? What are you actually going to do? So there are some fundamental questions that we can look at. Who will be responsible for carrying out each step? It might not just be the teacher alone. It could be others involved in the school. How long will the change take is another consideration for the teacher. It might be actually just a space of half a lesson or one lesson, or it could be over a period of a week or even a month. How long will each step take? Is it one action in the classroom, or is it a whole approach to a whole lesson? How will you monitor and track the progress? That's another question is worth considering in the planning phase, because you have to be prepared for all aspects of the reflective process. And in terms of acting, how will you monitor the effectiveness of what you're doing? How will you collect the data? How will you know the results of what you're doing? And of course, how will you record these? Will you use video? Would you just make notes for yourself in a journal? Could you get another teacher to watch you, to observe and to give you some feedback? And of course, part of acting is what did you learn from the whole process of going through this cycle? So checking goes on continually throughout, in the planning phase, in the doing phase, and in the review stage. You're continuously checking. You're not just engaging in either doing or planning. So what will you do with that learning is a significant question to ask with the review stage. How are you going to use the information? And what did the information that you collected impact in terms of change? What was the effectiveness of what you actually did? What can be done to further improve on what you're doing in the classroom? And how can you refine your own teaching in terms of the subject that you're teaching? What lessons have been learned, and how can these lessons be communicated to others? These are all aspects of this very simple process, and there are probably many more questions that you can consider for yourself in relation to plan, do, and review.